Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Our speaker tonight is Tyler Schilling, and I'm going to read. There's so much here. I'm going to read it out. So Tyler co-founded Schilling Robotics, along with co-founder Wes Gerriets. Am I saying that right?
Pretty close.
Enough. All right.
Close.
He's not just in the wings. He's like off. Yeah, no, he's not right there. With the vision of providing productive tools to remotely perform work in deep ocean. As president, he sets the business unit's vision and guides product innovation and development. And I'm going to do a little. I'm going to surprise you a little bit here, but I've got a little video, kind of like the. Okay, this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, so. Take it as this, but I did find this, Tyler. It's almost historically accurate, right, Tyler?
We had some professional help.
All right. So before co-founding the company, he worked for Muller International as director of VTOL development, where he led development activities for passenger aircraft capable of vertical takeoff and landing. He also worked as technical director for development and testing of specialized oceanographic equipment, including remote manipulators for Hydroscan Incorporated of San Diego, California. Schilling attended the management program at INSEAD in Paris, France. And he holds 3 patents on subsea devices. Thank you. Awesome. And has accumulated a wealth of experience and expertise in offshore operations. He is an active member of the Marine Technology Society, MTS, and is involved with the Explore Science Center in Davis, California, an organization committed to involving people in science, experiments. Never mind, I'll just get it. It's okay. Okay, are you ready? You guys practice this, right?
Yeah.
All right, Tyler Schilling. Come on, everybody. Thanks, Tyler, for joining us. Do we take a second to get the fire? Is that important? All right. Priorities, Tyler. Just a second. We did. Be careful, though. You might want to. You don't want to singe your hair.
That's a great tie-in, actually, because I was heavily involved with fire as a child.
Okay, so start there. Putting them out or starting them?
You know. I am happy to say that everyone I started eventually was put out.
Eventually.
Yep.
Come on, there's a story. I can tell.
Yeah, well, actually, there's many, but I will tell you one because my wife Joyce is here this evening, and early in the evolution of Schilling Robotics, we were in Wisconsin demonstrating for the university there one of our robot models. And on the way back to the airport, we saw these giant fireworks stands. And in California, you get a very limited form of fireworks. And in some other states, you get some pretty spectacular ones. So, of course, we had to make a brief stop and loaded up on all the forms of fireworks that you can't get in California. And I'm not going to go into how we actually got them back to California. Nothing I would ever engage in today.
There are children in the audience, yes.
But we got back and for months kind of forgot we had them. And then it occurred to us one evening that we never did anything with these, and so we took them out into the.
And they're better over time, right?
They
get
are.
better over
They
time.
age.
Yeah, yeah.
They're like wine, and we brought them north of the city of Davis out onto this country road, and the very first one that we lit off in the middle of this deserted road was this helicopter thing, and it was a multi-stage thing, and we sat there and watched it go. And it kind of paused for a second. Then the next stage went off, and this thing went horizontally out into this wheat field. And immediately started this giant blaze. And we thought we could put it out, and so we clambered over the fence, the two of us. It was the director of engineering at the time, and myself. And we were just stomping wildly for maybe 15 or 20 seconds, peered around us, and there was already a quarter of an acre on fire. And so we scrambled back into the truck and headed off. Fast forward, he lived in the Bay Area, so he was living at my house at the time. And fast forward to later that evening, and my wife gets home, and the washing machine was running, and she said, "What's the washing machine running for?" And we said, well, we just decided we were going to do a load of laundry. And she found us out pretty quick. Our smoke-entrenched jeans and shirts and everything were in the washing machine. Anyway, that's one of at least a dozen similar stories.
There was no more to that story after that. It
No.
was like, okay, cool, that's fine. Yeah, yeah.
I am very proud to announce, though, that the wheat had already been harvested. All we destroyed was some stubble that somebody was.
You were helping.
They were going to burn. They were going to burn it anyway.
Yeah, yeah. It's all part of the cycle.
That's correct.
Yeah, this is really great. So tell us. I mean, obviously that was tongue in cheek and that was fun watching the chat. But the technology's come so far just in the last couple of years.
The fire?
No, the transformer. The transformer.
Oh, the transformer. That's right.
But no, seriously though, tell us a little bit about your product and what it is your company does.
So we make robotic gear. It's really remotely controlled machines for use in the deep ocean. Our predominant customer set are companies that do exploration and production of oil and gas from the seafloor. We've been doing this a long time. In a couple of months, we're going to celebrate our 30th anniversary. So 3 decades of doing this stuff. And you know, when I reflect back on the whole concept that I told my mother I wanted to start a company to make underwater robotics in 1985, and she thought it was a great idea. It was pretty improbable, I must say, to choose that field.
Yeah, so I mean,
then.
so that's right where I would go with this. Is like, how did you end up in this? I mean, 1985. It's what was it? Something that you saw natural progression through your childhood towards something like this?
So I describe myself as a futurist.
Okay.
But I can only see about 15 minutes into the future. I never have really had any form of long-term vision at all, and how I got into this was my father was a physician in Davis, but at his heart he was really a frustrated farmer. And so when he retired from practicing medicine, he bought a farm up in the Capay Valley and in essence became kind of a gentleman rancher. And he used to torture us 3 boys by making us go up there and build fences and do things like that for less than $1 an hour in the summer. And the next door neighbor was a gentleman who restored historic race cars. And that was, very fascinating to me. So I went and got a job with this guy. He, during the racing season, used to be a crew chief on a racing series that was called Can-Am. It's not raced anymore. It was raced in across the United States and Canada. And I went out with him as a crew member one year, and at a race at Road Atlanta, there was a gentleman there with a revolutionary automobile, It was amazing from top to bottom. I struck up a relationship with this guy. He had a company in San Diego making specialized oceanographic equipment, and he ended up hiring me as his technical director. I went down there. My first job as technical director was the design and construction of a pair of robot arms for an underwater submarine called an ROV. This is the very start of the whole industry. So I was kind of thrust right into the middle of it. And this is a lesson for you entrepreneurs, the form of business that he had was a 50-50 partnership. And unfortunately, when the business started to get a little bit of traction, the two of them couldn't live with each other anymore, and the business blew up. In fact, this is another tragic, but in retrospect, funny story. The other gentleman, who was kind of a silent partner in the business, raced down to the bank one day, withdrew all of the company's funds, and brought the company to its knees. He was crazy, but he wasn't completely stupid. He ended up putting it in the form of cash in an envelope that he taped on the backside of the other guy's drafting board. So he wasn't in possession of the funds. He just denied the other owner access to them. Anywho, so the company blows up. I come back to Davis, and
I saw a couple of you actually take notes. That was not cool, by the way. I just not. Wait a minute.
if you need to know what kind of tape and how big the envelope is and all that stuff, I can help you after the presentation. So I came back here, and as you mentioned in my bio, I had worked at Muller International, and one of the gentlemen that I worked with there, Wes Gerriets, who I had tremendous respect for, I went to him and I said, Wes, we got to start an underwater robotic company, and he said, okay, and that's about as amazing as the startup story was. And I often tell people that if I had any idea how complex it was going to be, I never would have started. I mean,
starting a business or the actual product?
It was really founded predominantly on enthusiasm and ignorance. Were really the two fundamental ingredients.
The product has evolved. So like that very first product compared to the product you're doing now.
So that's really, really interesting because I got exposure. We weren't the first in the market. Some other people had been doing similar things, but only for a handful of years. And because I had experience in auto racing, had an interest in aerospace technologies, when I looked at the products that they were producing, I realized there were solutions from other industries that were way ahead of what these people were doing. And we actually, our very first product was, in retrospect, really advanced. We really took to heart a bunch of principles about usability, how to make the device serviceable, things that were way beyond what people were exploring in this kind of nascent market. And I'm really proud of the fact that we've always had extremely high standards and worked tirelessly to make stuff that is very productive and reliable.
And I think it should be stated for those of you who don't know that pretty much, and I think I'm safe to say this, pretty much if you ever watch any movie or anything where you see an ROV, that the arms, the robotic arms that are on the device are most likely created by Schilling Robotics. Is that
that's
fair
probably
to say?
a pretty good bet.
Yeah.
We probably, it's a small market, although I've been saying that for decades, and it's gotten a lot
There's
larger.
7 ROVs now, right?
It's gotten a lot larger. 99 out of 100 of these things that are used in the world are made by our silly little company in
That's a
in
pretty
Davis.
good bet then. Yeah.
And in fact, if you remember the tragedy in 2010 with the blowout in that BP had in the Gulf of Mexico, there were 34 robot arms that were used in that repair. 32 of them were made in Davis.
That's fantastic. That's great. That's wonderful. So as your company has grown, how many people are you now?
We have just over 400 people now.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What would you say the biggest challenge has been in growing, essentially?
So and this is kind of interesting because as I've watched the recent evolution of crowd-funded activities like Kickstarter, I see these wonderful and amazing things in one category that happen, and then this category of things that are more often than not failures. And the ones that fit in the failure category are almost always hardware developments. And the reason I bring that up is that our products are dominantly hardware, and it's a very tough thing, in fact, to do. And the other thing that has been really difficult over the history of our company is that they get used globally. And so when you have somebody call you up from Singapore and say that they need help with a product that you've delivered to them, you have to figure out how to help them. And in fact, when we sold our company in 2012, one of the reasons that we selected FMC, there were a number of companies that wanted to acquire us, was because they had a global footprint and they were in all the places where we wanted to serve our customers. But it's been very challenging throughout the years to do development of reliable hardware. These are machines that are very complicated, and you produce them in low numbers. And that's an area in the 2x2 matrix that's the most difficult. Low repetition, high complexity, and then when you add to it that customers are going to be using them in the North Sea, they're going to be using them in Brazil, in Singapore, in the Gulf of Mexico, in China. I didn't choose all that wisely. It's part of only seeing 15 minutes into the future.
So what would you say over the years has been you obviously had amazing success, but what's been like your biggest mistake, if you will, that you think?
Biggest mistake, I would say, kind of started early in the pre-company, in fact, and it was the fact that I didn't complete a formal education. So I have a high school diploma from Davis High. Confession, it was fraudulently obtained.
He's a pyromaniac.
When I was a junior in high school,
there still are kids in the room, right?
California introduced something called the high school equivalency exam. And so you could go take this examination and get the legal equivalent of a high school diploma. So I went and took this test. It was a grueling 6-hour test, the culmination of which was having to properly fill out a mail order form to buy seahorses. I passed it. I got my high school equivalency certificate. I was the youngest of 3 brothers, and my mother was a very proud and determined woman, and she was going to be damned if one of her sons didn't have a legitimate high school diploma. So this was many years ago. She went down to Davis High School and she demanded one and got it.
Sheer force, will, determination.
So that's another kind of genetic and environmental advantage that I've had. Was both of my parents were very resourceful and determined people.
Yeah.
And, demanding and getting a high school diploma is a great example of what you can do if you apply yourself.
I love it.
But so not getting a formal education, and then later in the whole cycle, some of the biggest mistakes that I've made are actually making bad hires.
Oh, interesting.
Hiring the wrong people can be a crippling and damaging thing. The virtuous counter to that is hiring great people is absolutely essential to your continued success. They make everything possible.
One of the things that I found out just in asking around about you and your company is that you do have a great culture at your company. And in fact, tomorrow or today was Waffle Wednesday. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that it is a fun, good work environment. So how do you cultivate that? How do you find the right people? and grow. I mean, to 400 people, that's tough to grow at that size.
Yeah, so it's really been a work in progress, both the culture of the company and finding and retaining all these wonderful people. And it's also been a very challenging thing because of the industry that we're in. The offshore energy industry is a heavily cyclical industry. Everybody's watched in the news how the price of a barrel of oil has dropped from over 100 in the middle of last year to now around $50. It's been cut in half. And what that does is makes fortunes of a capital equipment provider like ourselves ebb and flow with the fortunes of the industry. And it's even worse when you're a capital equipment provider because your activity level is the first derivative of the activity in the industry. And so it can make retaining great people tough. But I think the most essential thing in creating a virtuous culture and hiring and retaining great people is you yourself deciding that you're going to do whatever you can to make them successful in their roles and be very transparent about it so that they understand that that you're really taking their interests first. What I've always believed is that if you'll walk through fire for your employees and customers, they'll do the same for you.
So looking back over the last 30 years, I already asked what your biggest mistake was. On the other hand, what's like the biggest decision that you feel you made that just really made a difference, the best decision that you made? And maybe you didn't realize it was such a big decision at the time or that it was a great decision at the time, but in hindsight, is there a moment where you look back and you go...
It's actually related to the previous question, and it's that I decided along with Wes early on that as a company and with the people that work for us, whenever we were faced with a tough question, we would always endeavor to err on the side of the individual. And when we were faced with that same circumstance with our customers, we would err on the side of the customer. Every one of these tough decisions that you're faced with, they seem to have a life of your own and they can be very confusing, but if you can establish kind of a North Star principle in advance of facing these things, it makes them much easier. And oftentimes, the toughest decisions are the ones where you don't know, it's not clear whether you should turn left or right. And so if you establish a principle like that, we're going to err on the side of the individual and we're going to err on the side of the customer. It makes that stuff a lot easier. And in fact, it pays huge dividends over the long run.
That's wonderful. And you've stayed, and I have to say, I think we're very happy that you have. You've stayed in the region as you've grown, and you're in Davis. Has that been a challenge at all for you? Are you glad you stayed, or has it had some positives? Are some challenges related to that?
Can we switch the mic off for just a second?
Oh, sure.
No, it's been extremely...
We're not recording at all.
It's been extremely easy. I've only had 2 stints outside of the region. When I was on the racing team, it was headquartered on Long Island. And then when I worked for the oceanographic company, that was in San Diego. This region it's my home. It's where I grew up. And I was reflecting on the fact the other day that the household that I grew up in, my mother and father would almost religiously tell the 3 of us that you can do anything and you can be anything as long as you applied yourself, and that's what it seemed like in our household. My father was a hyper functionary. The garage was filled with tools to build things. Before he was a physician, he was a machinist at a company back east called Jones and Lamson that made turret lathes. We just always built stuff. They kept telling us that. I watched from the living room floor Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, and it's all just part of the environment for me. It's never been hard to stay here. I love this. I love this area, and just really enjoy it and the people.
Well, we're glad you stayed. That's for sure. So when you're not running Schilling Robotics, and I know you're no longer doing the day-to-day, correct? But what do you?
I never really did, to be honest with you. And that's one of the key aspects, I think, of a culture, at least from my perspective, is to try and create something that largely runs itself. Mm-hmm. You know, there are things, roles that I have played, I think, essentially. Thank heavens they haven't been a lot of them.
That's great. What do you do when you're not there? What do you do with your spare time?
So I spend 90% of my time at Schilling Robotics, and then the other 90% of my time I spend with my wife.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, so I heard I was supposed to ask you.
Right.
Tell us, is there a story there?
There is, actually. We built one, I think it was the second year. It was called Robot Wars back then. And we decided that we were going to create an entry. And so a bunch of employees got together. I funded the hardware and materials. And we spent a lot of time building this thing. And we ended up completely destroying a whole set of robots that we came up against. The robot was called Thor, and it actually had a 2-stroke go-kart engine in it, running a hydraulic pump, and a gigantic titanium hammer on the front of it.
Does everybody know what BattleBots is, by the way? Does everybody here go, okay, just want to make sure.
And you can still find a couple of the matches on YouTube. When I'm feeling sorry for myself, you know, I'll go watch one of those. But so we destroyed a series of other robots, and one of them was actually pretty funny. We were relentlessly hammering this machine after we had disabled it, and headed back to the pits, and this one team was on the way, and they had drugged the hulk of this thing back there, and it's actually not all that funny. But this one young kid was just beside himself because they had bought this Briggs & Stratton engine that was on the top of it on Friday, and their plan was they were going to return it to the store.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
On Monday.
Bad plan.
So I look at it this way, actually. Sure, we dashed their hopes of doing that, but we taught them an early lesson about doing underhanded things is going to cause you trouble in your life. Anyway, we made it to the final round. There was a very clever gentleman by the name of Mark Satrakian, who is in the Hollywood special effects industry, had produced this fantastic machine called Master. And we had completely destroyed the gas-powered chop saw that he had on the front of it, disabled one of the two motors so all it could do was spin in circles, and made the foolish mistake of going in for the last kill. His spiked tail spun around, pierced through the side of the chassis of our robot, hit the clutch on the engine, and stopped the hydraulic pump, and he ended up defeating us.
I always hate when the spiked tail comes around. It's always,
it happens so often. We should have seen that.
You should have come. You really honestly should have seen it coming. Yeah, I'm glad you recognize that. So, what's next for Schilling Robotics? Are you allowed to share? Are you allowed to tell us what you foresee in the near future?
Sure. So, the company that acquired us, FMC Technologies, is the world's largest provider of the seafloor equipment that's used to produce the oil. So kind of the fancy high pedigreed plumbing system that's used to bring the oil up out of the ground so that you can transport it somewhere. We happen to make the gear that's used to install it and maintain it. And so the thing that I have successfully sold the leadership of the company on is a concept that the robots that we've been building for the last 30 years are actually fundamentally responsible for why that gear is 10 to 12 times as expensive as the counterparts that you find on land. So if you take, for instance, this thing called a Christmas tree, which is really the key plumbing for an oil well, and you look at the land-based one and then compare it to its subsea counterpart, the subsea counterpart is 10 to 12 times as expensive and heavy. And I studied this ever since they acquired us to try and understand why is that the case, and have concluded that it's because the robots compared to the two workers in the pickup truck are far more clumsy. And so the development program that I have pitched them on, and we're going to do exploratory work on it this year, is to create a brand new class of robots whose function it is to dramatically reduce the cost and complexity of seafloor oil systems.
That's fantastic. Very cool. Very cool. So I was going to ask you, like, what you see in general about the, with the future of robotics, and since you can only go 15 minutes in the future, we'll just wait 15 minutes.
Right. That's a much more accurate way to do it, by the way, even at only 15 minutes.
Tyler, thank you so much. It's so inspiring to hear somebody. You are clearly. First, is there something you want to tell? Is there something you would like to say to all these young entrepreneurs
Sure.
and other people who are starting businesses or growing businesses?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. First of all, I would like to congratulate everybody for deciding to do it. It takes an awful lot of courage or an awful lot of ignorance or a combination of the two. And so the first thing I'd like to share with people is that I congratulate you for doing it. The second thing is that I'd like to tell people that it's an extremely difficult adventure, but it's also very, very rewarding. As I reflect on my career, there's a direct linkage, at least in my case, between the level of fulfillment that I get and how difficult something is to achieve. I never got a lot of joy out of accomplishing the easy stuff. So somehow, at least for me, they're linked, and I think it's possible that it's that way for everyone. And then the final thing that I wanted to share with folks is that I don't know what the statistic is today, but back when I started Schilling Robotics, the statistic in the United States was that 90% of small businesses fail in the first 6 months. So I don't know what it is now, but at the time it was 90% fail within the first 6 months. And what I like to tell people is we failed 100 times in the first 6 months. You have to just keep going. You have to figure out a way around the challenges. And what I used to tell myself when it was really difficult and times were really dark, I would really lean on my lifelong procrastination skills and tell myself, why quit today? You can quit at any time in the future.
Well, clearly you're doing what you're meant to do, and we really do appreciate you. Oh yeah, we want to do QA. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sure there's some questions here.
I don't take questions.
No, yeah. Questions? Oh, all the way to the back. There we go. Can we see you stand up? There we go. What's your name? Angela?
How programs will prepare students to be employable by Schilling in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, good. So the question is, what programs would prepare students, right? Is that correct? To be employable by Schilling? Did I catch that right, or most of it? in 5 to 10 years?
Oh, man. So we're clear on the 15-minute thing,
Yeah.
right? So I would say the most important program of all is the one that your parents are actually running at home. And it has a lot to do with the encouragement they're providing you and the fact that they bring you to events like this. That's really the most important program, because all of the other technical things won't help you if you don't already have that. So congratulations.
Good job, Angela's mom.
That's a tough act to follow, and nobody's going to be as cute as that. Sorry. But, right here. Phil?
So you mentioned some of the biggest mistakes were hiring the wrong people. And so what kinds of things do you look for and do you avoid in hiring people?
So some of the biggest mistakes that I've made, and it's almost in every case, it was seeing experience on their resume that I thought aligned perfectly with what our needs were, and became blind to all of the other crucial things like the soft skills. So if somebody, did something that was exactly like the project that, we were about to undertake and was very difficult, just falling in love with the fact, and it was true, they weren't fibbing on their resume, they actually did these things, but what it caused me to be blind to was the fact they didn't fit in our culture at all. And virtually every single one of the failures were cultural mismatches. They don't have the same values that you do, and that's a gigantic problem. I used to think some of the technical geniuses that we had that also had behavioral baggage, that I would somehow be able to shield the company from them, find a way to isolate them so that their acidic personalities didn't corrode anyone else and everything. Never had my first success is still in my future somewhere on that.
In other words, would you say it's a passion for the work?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Passion for the work that they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a key ingredient, but being able to respect other people and work harmoniously with them, at least in our culture, is paramount. One of the things I try to counsel people at our company on that seem counselable, some people are trainable and some are not. The ones that are a slight cultural mismatch, and I think I might be able to help them, one of the things I tell them is when you address somebody at our company, in our vendor base or our customer set, pretend you're talking to me. If you treat them exactly the way you treat me, you're going to do a great job. If they're unable to do that, they're gone.
So where we work at, we're a digital marketing agency business. We kind of have a quadrant scale that we have where it's, we have company culture versus technical skill set. And we always like to try to find a middle ground, like you said, somebody who's willing to learn, who's coachable. But where do you find the point, where culture maybe overtakes skill set, or where skill set maybe overtakes culture?
So I think kind of the older and more experienced I become, I don't think technical really overcomes culture. Whenever the cultural behaviors or mismatch involve in abusing other individuals. I don't care if you're not outgoing, or you're shy, or how you dress, but if you don't treat other people with respect, that's a deal breaker, and I don't give a damn if you're Einstein. It really poisons the culture. So that is a crucial dimension of it. And there are all kinds of related ones, to disrespect, like being dishonest. That is that's a killer circumstance. You really need to have supreme respect for other people. And one of the most important ways, especially in my opinion, especially if you're in a leadership position in a culture, to show respect for other people is to be generous with your time. So find ways to make sure that your day, all of the minutes aren't consumed, so that when the people who look up to you or work with you need something from you, especially your time, you're able to give it. Drop whatever it is you're doing and help them.
At the very back there.
Integrity sounds like what you're describing. This isn't technological. I was confused by this. You mentioned 2010, the oil problem, and I don't know how oil comes up. Does it disperse? Does it what? But we always wondered, as they tried to gather this oil to stop it, why didn't they just put a 100-foot round diaphragm on the surface that came down 5 feet, and then suck, when the oil came up, just suck it out from the top of it? Does the oil come straight up? Does it disperse?
Yeah, so they actually attempted a containment vessel like that, and hydrocarbons in reservoirs, especially on the seafloor, have a lot of interesting characteristics. One of them is that they're relatively hot when they come out of there, and there are mixtures of water, oil, and gas. And when you take this hot mixture that contains natural gas in it and you chill it, it creates a methane hydrate, which ends up plugging holes in things. So what happens in that containment environment is that mixture chills, the outlet where you're trying to suck the stuff out gets an ice plug in it in a matter of minutes, and you're all done. It comes out everywhere else that you didn't want it to. It's a very complicated problem, in fact. And that's one of the reasons why it took months to fix it.
What is the solution if this ever happens in the future? What are they thinking how they would handle it next time?
So they have changed a number of rules, and one of them has to do, and we've developed a technology. In fact, Thomas is on the team at our company that developed this technology. They have instituted, it's recommended practice at the moment. It's going to become a requirement in a year or so, to have a new design for a mechanism down there that's called a blowout preventer. This thing failed, and it's actually an embarrassing failure when you understand the technical dimensions of it. But what this thing is a big giant hydraulic shear that if you do lose control of the well, it's designed to cut everything in half and then seal, which when you have big pieces of steel in there, that's a non-trivial problem. It had a design defect in it, and so it closed partially and then jammed, and your last line of defense is now a problem. They've instituted those changes, as well as required in certain locations around the world to have something that's called a capping stack. So it's designed, if that blowout preventer fails, to have a way to bolt onto the top of it and create a controllable seal. It's really unfortunate, this is another pattern in the world, that it takes a tragedy or a disaster for people to do things that they already knew they should have done. So it's an awful circumstance, actually.
Jan?
Outside of the deep sea and oil realm, what are the kind of more modern uses of robotics that you find most fascinating?
You know, the thing that I am most excited about in the field of robotics is the rapidly coming promise of the automated operation of cars. I think self-driving cars are going to do absolutely wonderful things. You know, it amazes me that last year in the United States alone, somewhere in the high 30,000s, people died in automobiles. This is 2014. You know, we consider ourselves pretty advanced. It's really time to get humans away from operating these things. They're not great at it. And and the problem is they think that they are. And they're really awful at it. That's a lot of people to kill every year in just the United States. So robotic cars, and interesting note there, a woman that I went to high school with is now the chief privacy officer for the Department of Motor Vehicles, and she came to visit me a year and a half ago because the DMV is working on what should they do to regulate robotic automobiles. And I told her, don't do anything, just get out of the way. And, and she said, but what if the computers go crazy and all that wonderful stuff? And I said, it's not really going to matter. They're still going to beat the humans.
I was going to say, can't be worse than 30,000.
It's going to be way better. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
How can you say that when we are seeing all the tremendous failure of computers with malware infecting them all over the place, and surveillance and all this stuff, there's something that's more than humans, it's machines,
Yeah. No, I still, and I understand your point, but I still think by comparison, even with all that, you've seen things in the press about how there are vulnerabilities in the software system in an automobile and people could hack them. Well, what are they going to do? Come hack my car and cause some evil thing to happen? For it to be worse than the way humans are doing it at the moment, they'd have to figure out a way to do it on a mass scale to 10,000 people simultaneously, and they're all separate software processes that are running. I'll tell you another story. So I don't know if you recognize the name Danny Hillis, if anybody recognizes that name, but he's the gentleman who started the very first supercomputer company in the world called Thinking Machines. And I had the pleasure of hearing Mr. Hillis speak a couple of years ago, and the interviewer asked him, what do you think about the reticence to adopt robotic automobile technology, and will society ever allow it? And he said, people accept change very slowly. He said, imagine for a minute that the automobile as we know it didn't exist. And I came to you with this idea, and I said, I'm going to make a metal box with 4 wheels on it. I'm going to put an engine in it, 2 chairs. You and I will sit in it. I'm going to put another metal box inside of it with an explosive liquid. And we're going to create these ribbons of asphalt. You and I are going to go zooming down in one direction at 60 miles an hour while people come in an opposing direction at 60 miles an hour also. But don't worry about it, because I'm going to paint a yellow stripe down the middle of the road. He was right. Everybody would say, forget it, don't do it. And that's just the way things progress.
Back here.
So going back to culture, in kind of creating a culture, when you are a co-founder and there's more than one, say, leader involved, how does that work when you have more than one person founding the company?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because we really, while I founded it with Wes, we quickly brought on, not long after, 3 other individuals, so there were a total of 5 of us. And not long ago I was reflecting on the fact that, my God, I must have been amazingly lucky, because all 5 of these people were wonderful contributors. We got along really well and everything worked. And I thought about it a little while and I realized, oh, no, wait a minute. I engaged in an interview process that lasted like 5 to 10 years, because these were all people that I grew up with. So I think one of the first things you have to start with is you need to have a fundamental compatibility with people that you found with. They need to have a different but complementary skill set to what you're doing, but at the cultural level, you need to see eye to eye really closely, or you're going to have to change something.
So back to the failure of the first 6 months. What was your first 6 months or a year or 5 years? Well, what was your time spent doing? If you could generalize or even give me benchmarks of here were important moments in that time.
So our first 6 months were really spent developing and building our first model machine, because we decided really early that machine sold for $40,000, and it's a piece of capital equipment. It's supposed to last 10 years, and I made a decision immediately that there was no way we were going to be walking around with brochures convincing people to spend $30,000 on a piece of equipment from a company they'd never heard of. And so we decided we're going to build and debug a unit of this and take it to customers and let them run it. So we focused entirely on developing the machine, and then the next step was to get appointments. We went all over the United States, took it to people's facilities, let them run it, and they were able to see immediately the virtues of what we had versus other folks.
And you're also able to get feedback then as well, too, correct?
That's right. We didn't accept any of it, but
yeah.
we got a lot of feedback.
One more question. You Schilling Robotics, but I understand that a lot of the units you have are run by people. What degree of autonomy do your systems have, or is it entirely fly-by-wire?
They actually have a fairly limited degree of autonomy, but that's an axis that we continue to develop on, and we really think of it more in the region of shared control, where you have one set of problems that the machine is superior at, and then another set that humans are great at. Like one of the developments that we're working on at the moment uses the video as a feedback element, and the user decides what they want the machine to do. For instance, what hole to plug this hydraulic connector in is something that a human's great at, but guiding it precisely is something the machine is great at. So it's a pretty limited, compared to other forms of robotics, a limited degree of autonomy, but it's one where a lot of virtuous development is going on.
Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up. But I know this is a big moment for you. So this is our little
Thank you.
our little award for just saying that you were here, and we know how valuable your time is. It means a lot to us. Wasn't he amazing? Everybody, yeah.